ways to keep kids out of detention and out of the juvenile justice system entirely. And I just really wanted to point these things out to show that Pima County, I've been here 6 years, and it's really was apparent when I walked in the door that all of our stakeholders, all of the people that work here, were just very collaborative in nature, and I just wanted to share that. So what the type of cases, in case you don't know, we here at juvenile court, we have dependency. So those are when a child whose home is unfit and it's either due to abuse or neglect. So that's our child welfare. We call those dependency cases, or our delinquency cases. And those are the youths who commit an act who would normally be charged as an adult with a crime and in our criminal system. So I kind of also wanted to make sure that you understand, a lot of people say juvenile court, they immediately jump to the delinquency side of the house. It's, oh, juvenile court is where the bad kids go. But the majority of the work that the judicial officers do is actually in the dependency realm. And I'll show the numbers here, what pre-pandemic and then last year looked like. So in 2019, our dependency cases were at 1116 over the course of the year. And that's a little higher than normal. That's kind of where we've been running for the past 5 years. It dipped a little bit when Arizona Department of Child Safety went to a Safe AZ model. So the numbers have been trending up just a little bit. But then conversely, you see in 2020, the numbers did jump up. And we don't have actual hard data and evidence as to why numbers would go up during a pandemic. You have stay at home, you have kids not going to school. So why would those numbers go up? Well, actually, if the kids started attending school virtually, so we believe that teachers who are mandatory reporters had an insight into homes where they'd normally see the kids just at school. And so we think that maybe some of the reporting happened there. On the flip side, looking at the youth that came into our system, I have 5,500 referrals pre-pandemic. And a referral is, consider that either a paper referral or a physical referral. It's akin to, in the adult system, being arrested or cited to the court. So we had referrals, 5,000 referrals in 2019, and that number dramatically dropped in 2020, 3,200. And again, school being the kind of one of the largest components in young teens' lives, they're not with their counterparts, they're not out causing trouble. So we think, and we know that actually our school referrals, that actually is about 20% of the cases or the referrals that come to our court. Now I want to make a distinction between referrals and petitions. So you see that the number is definitely different between what was referred to juvenile court and what was actually filed as a petition. Working with the county attorney's office and Laura's office, we actually have an agreement where our court, our probation officers are able to look at certain offenses, lower level misdemeanor offenses, and make the determination whether or not to divert youth. So in 2019, we were able to divert youth and not actually have them have charges filed against them, about 3,500 cases. And those they don't disappear. Diversion doesn't mean nothing happens. There's usually consequences, either some kind of community service, a letter of apology, some type of consequences for those. And our probation officers work with those youth, getting them into programs and services they might need. But ultimately, the goal is to not drag them into the system deeper. So now we look at what happened in 2020 in the during the pandemic. And our numbers went down, but not as much, a couple of thousand from the referrals, but to the petitions, it was only a couple of hundred, well, about 500-600. And again, so these are the more, obviously when a petition's filed, those are the more serious cases and serious offenses, or the youth has gone through the system, had multiple chances at referrals and didn't follow through. So then they came to the court. The next number I share with you is our average daily population. I mentioned that we have a detention facility. That facility was built in the year 2000, and it was actually built to house up to 300 kids. Back in the 2000s, we had probably about 200 youth in our detention facility. And it was the JDAI, the Juvenile Detention's Alternative Initiative, where we really found that the research said any amount of time a youth spends in a detention facility is going to ultimately impact their lives down the road. So we started working very closely with all of our justice partners and law enforcement and find ways to, again, mitigate how these kids are coming in, and do they really need to be in our system, and can we divert them? So the change from 2000, where we had almost 200, in 2019, our average daily population was down to about 49. In 2020, you see that that number reduced down to 38. I did check this morning, and we are right now at 31 youth in our system. And again, overarching, what does the courthouse look like pre-pandemic and during this past year? The amount of public traffic, foot traffic coming into our courthouse was about 14,000, 15,000 individuals coming to hearings, filing paperwork, seeing their probation officer. All of that, when COVID hit, we went to telephonic, electronic, video, finding ways that people did not have to come into the courthouse. And you can see the dramatic drop down to 2,500. Invitation-wise, we've posted that information on our public website. I can share that link in the chat later. But I just want to say that part of the managing was that collaboration between our justice partners. We already had the relationships built from all of the collaborative work that I mentioned, but really during COVID, it was those relationships with our county attorney, our public defense services, Office of Children's Counsel, the tribal nation attorneys. We pulled the sheriff's department, the clerk's office, we pulled everybody together to say, how do we move forward? Because we didn't shut our doors. We had to, all of our hearings had to continue. How best do we meet the needs of all of the participants? And I think I wanted to share that with you all, because I think that was the biggest thing that got us through this pandemic. And moving forward really quickly, I want to share, actually, I just wanted to share kind of what did our court look like before and after. Before we were in the community, we were doing events. We had adoption days in the park. We met in large groups and in our collaboratives. And then with COVID, we had to do very small gatherings. A lot of things are being done virtually now. And then moving forward, our judges are looking at what is best. Are our hearings always going to be virtual? No, we think there's going to be a hybrid coming back. We want to do some things in person, but some things we're finding that anecdotally, parents are showing up more to some of their dependency hearings, parents that we hadn't seen in years. And I think that that tells us that we can't go back to exactly normal. A lot of our programs for youths and families are also being looked at, how best to get it out to our community and engaging with those families. We're training staff on using the new technology. We were very Teams shy at first, but now a lot of our judges are using Teams as well. And just overarching for a fun story, finding innovative ways to celebrate. We had one of our commissioners, longtime family drug court commissioner, retire, and we did a drive-through say goodbye. It was like a similar to a drive-through graduation. So employees, staff, attorneys were able to drive through our parking lot. They decorated their cars and waved goodbye to her. So I just wanted to share some of those stories as well.
Thank you so much, and for all of that information. And it's really encouraging to see all the work that the court system and the juvenile court has been doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Nora Sydow from the National Center for State Courts. She's the principal court management consultant there. She's directed all of their pandemic and public health projects since 2014, obviously including the pandemic, but since 2014. Prior to joining the National Center for State Courts, she worked as a college instructor in a criminal justice program. So thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, thanks everyone. I wanted to speak for a few minutes on some national initiatives and kind of give the national perspective of some things that have been going on in the court world. If you're not familiar with the Conference of Chief Justices and Conference of State Court Administrators, those two organizations are made up of each of the Chief Justices of the Courts of Last Resort and the State Court Administrator in every state and territory. So for example, in Arizona, Chief Justice Brutinel and Dave Byers are the representatives on those entities in those organizations. But a year ago this month, they formed the Rapid Response Team, which was a group of several Chief Justices and State Court Administrators to respond to the COVID pandemic. They formed very quickly, acted very nimbly, and really have been working for the past year to push out a lot of information and resources, tools for courts, for judges, for court partners, checklists and bench cards. I think we have had close to 50 webinars with tens of thousands of participants. But recently, it launched a new initiative that I wanted to talk for a couple minutes about. It's called the Implementation Lab. I'll pull up a website in just a minute, and I can put a link in the chat. But the focus has really been about taking all of the innovations and advancements that have happened in courts since the pandemic a year ago, and really focus on making them sustainable and institutionalizing those practices. We've seen more advancement in courts in the last year than we have in the last probably a couple, at least, decades. A lot of the advancements and innovations are on the technology side with remote proceedings, but not just remote hearings, remote services. Self-help centers, for example, have gone online. Clerks' offices are doing, marriage licenses and other services for the public in an online way. So it launched these implementation labs. And if you don't mind, I'll put the screen up, partly just so you can see the list of topics, but there's also, so the National Center has partnered with the Conference of Chief Justices and COSCA on this initiative. All the resources that I mentioned that it's pushed out in the past year are available here, but as well, you can read a little bit more about this implementation lab. But the idea was to put out a solicitation. It went out in January to the whole nation, encouraging courts to apply to be part of this implementation lab, really asking courts in a variety of topics. I'll scroll down so you can see them. We have 11, but basically the ask was, if you're doing something really innovative and cool in these topics, want to collaborate with other courts and really work on evaluating them, getting any technical assistance you need to really institutionalize the changes you've made. The idea that, there's a lot of...
For 7 years, and he serves a dual role as both a felony trial attorney and also as the legislative and policy expert for their office. He is also an active board member of Arizona Attorneys for Criminal Justice, serving as co-chair of the Legislative Committee. Thank you for joining us, Nate.
Oh, thank you, Valena. I appreciate it. I'm very happy to be here. So when I was thinking about kind of what to present kind of from a public defense perspective on this pandemic, I went through a lot of iterations on how this would go. And first of all, I apologize for the super pretentious background. It was either this or my living room home office. So it fit the theme. So what I've decided to really present to you guys today is kind of the upfront when the pandemic first hit, from our perspective as public defenders, and a lot of the frustration, but then really move towards the positives that have come out of that, the ways that we've been able to take some of those frustrations and some of the good things that have come out. When this all first hit last March, the most immediate challenge that we had was clients who were incarcerated in the Pima County Jail, and the risk to their health and to our COs and to the jail staff. And it wasn't just a public defense problem. It was a prosecutorial problem. It was a court problem. We had people in the jail, particularly for low-level nonviolent felonies, who had not been convicted and all of a sudden were in a very high-risk environment. We were fielding phone calls from our clients. I mean, some of the most terrified phone calls I've ever received were during that time. And, you know, we take on a lot of that trauma that our clients deal with. So I think for us, the most immediate thing was, what do we do about people who are in the jail? How do we talk to judges about rethinking bond? How do we work with the county attorney on release and agreeing to release conditions? So the first thing that we did was we had 20 attorneys from our office who spent 3 12-hour days over a 3-day weekend going through every case in our office, looking at their release conditions, looking at whether we believed, given this new extenuating circumstance, that release should be reconsidered, and delivering those to the county attorney and to the courts. So that was our first. I mean, I'll tell you, I had a high-risk older client who was calling me probably 2 or 3 times a day, and not to annoy, but because he was legitimately scared, and I was the only person he knew that could do anything. I was the only human connection he had outside of the jail. And so that was kind of our first, we had some frustrations kind of getting that going. What I will say is that the Pima County Court Administration, the presiding criminal judge, and our offices really galvanized quickly. And within about a week or two, they had a team that was meeting every week and updating us, and especially when the pandemic was new and it was week to week as to where things were going to go and what was happening. And so there was a concerted effort to rethink release conditions, and we were able to do that. Of course, then we had the challenge of indigent clients. Can we also then step up trying to find housing services so that our clients aren't just released, onto the streets with no phone and no place to sleep? And that was also, a challenge, is how do we bring that aspect into it? And then kind of hearings stopped for a while. There really wasn't much going on as far as hearings at all. And because we were trying to figure out the right way to handle this pandemic, and we did a lot of stipulations. And I think that's where some of our stress and frustration came in as public defenders, because all the burden largely fell on us to coordinate stipulations to continue non-substantive hearings. And this is where we kind of, and when I speak about the county attorney's office, I'm noting the previous administration that was there in May. Ms. Conover has done a fantastic job. But there was a lot of, well, you guys do it, and if you don't get your stipulations in time, you're gonna face sanctions, that kind of thing. And so there was this really weird pressure on us to take control of how hearings went at first. The good that came out of that was, I think, and I'm going to go through a little bit, was that I think everyone in the system developed a greater understanding of what we deal with as public defenders. We don't always get to talk to our clients until the day before, and that's not always within our control. We don't always get responses from county attorneys in a timely manner when we're requesting stipulations. those kind of things. So as things started fleshing out, I think it became more of a shared burden as people understood that, there are a lot of things that are outside of our control, particularly in such a uncertain situation to begin with. So, the confusion and chaos at the beginning, I think, really led to some really positive results towards the end. One of them is, I think one of the greatest challenges of public defenders is that we don't have time for our caseloads as much as we would like to. I work with probably some of the best attorneys and smartest attorneys I've ever met. Our biggest challenge is time to work a case and pressure to resolve cases quickly because more are coming in. When things slowed down, we had a lot more time to really dig into our cases. And I will tell you that made a huge difference in our ability to serve our clients. In our ability to do more research. It really, to me, was really a great opportunity to see things that maybe I'd been missing in the past as I was dealing with pressure, and maybe be more assertive about, I'm going to take time. I don't care how long this case takes to resolve. I think it sharpened my skills big time. The other thing that I think it helped on our end was I think it showed the judges got a little more of a window into the challenges that we face as defense attorneys, particularly, in a pandemic when, we weren't always able to provide housing for our clients. And we do have clients that are living on the streets and may not have access to communication and, those kind of things. And that, we are often working off of the fly, and that we're not being lazy when we don't have an answer for the court, right away. And that, we are dealing with very unique challenges, and we are dealing with a very unique client population. So I think the judges got a very, very good insight into what we do, how we deal with our clients, that kind of thing. And what I noticed was that judges becoming a lot more patient, with us becoming a lot more confident in when we assert something that we're not just covering up, for something that, that we're dealing with very real situations. I do think the county attorneys also, got more of a window. I mean, it was very antagonistic at the beginning when we were trying to explain why we would need a stipulation or a continuance, or why it was not necessary to go into court to try to get a warrant for someone in the middle of a pandemic, that we could actually just continue these hearings and really, focus on the important things and focus on the things that needed to be done. And for me personally, we also got a better understanding of our clients. I think one of the traps that we fall into sometimes, especially when you've done this job for a while, is that when your client's not showing up for court and your client's missing meetings, and you just assume that they don't care about their case. And you just start to kind of get cynical, like, well, if they don't care about their case, kind of why should I? And one of my colleagues started doing something, and then I picked it up because it was so successful. Most of our clients do have cell phones. So she started setting up Zoom meetings and sending them links that they could use on their phone. I will tell you, we might have a 20% show rate for in-office client meetings. I had a 90% show rate for Zoom meetings with my clients. Now, is it harder to go over discovery and that kind of thing? Yes, but with the pandemic, we weren't there yet. We weren't needing to do those kind of things because we were still working the cases. But we were able to develop communication and skills, and it really was a window that, maybe when our clients tell us that the bus was late, the bus was late. Maybe when they tell us that they, got sick, or that they couldn't find transportation, or their car broke down, they don't have a car with a warranty. So, like a lot of our clients are dealing with challenges that we have kind of, I think, we've fallen into a rut sometimes of just assuming that that's false information. And then to kind of rediscover that the clients really do care about their case, and that maybe we have a responsibility to make it as easy as possible for them to develop the relationship with us, for them to develop their trust with us, to meet them where they are. So I think for me as a professional and valuing client relationships, that was a huge revelation. And it's probably something that I will continue to do. So if my client says, I have a 2-hour bus ride to get to your office, if I don't need to see, if we don't have to sit down and go through pictures or videos, let's do it, by Zoom. But it's really kind of
excellent point, and it's an excellent takeaway that I hear from all of the panelists about how going forward we may be keeping this remote type of contact. Thank you so much, Mr. Wade. We do have questions, so I want to make sure we get to the questions we have from journalists. So our first question that we have is particularly for County Attorney Conover. And I mean, thank you for sharing your struggles of your office during COVID-19. So what the journalist is Tim Iago, I apologize if I'm saying your name wrong, from Arizona Attorney Magazine. And he's wondering about your response to the news that Governor Ducey declined the federal offer of vaccines that could have helped out Pima County. Do you see this as an issue of effectiveness, or do you see it as a turf battle? Do you have a perspective on that?
First of all, is my volume a little better now? I know we were trying to get rid of that. Oh, thank goodness.
It's great. It's great.
Well, this is an incredibly timely question, as I understand it. I think Governor Ducey is making statements in Tucson right now. And so I apparently am already going to be in meetings this afternoon, it looks like, with our county administrator, Chuck Huckleberry. For those journalists who are new to the area or outside of the county attorney system, unlike the district attorney system, also means that I have a huge civil division of lawyers working in the civil unit, and the county is our client. And so I think the pressure question coming forward here is going to be to what extent the county can lawfully communicate directly with the White House, can communicate directly with FEMA, can provide its own resources to receive vaccinations and distribute them effectively here locally in direct partnership with FEMA. And that's an area of question. And then also with whether our local mask ordinance, will also be affected by the governor's statements this morning as well.
Thank you. Next question is from Michael Lyle with the Nevada Current. This is, I think, could be answered by a number of the panelists. So with courts allowing Zoom hearings, it's leaving out some of the most vulnerable populations who struggle with internet access. So how are the courts addressing these gaps?
I'll go ahead and answer that. This is Tina. For juvenile court, we recognize that a lot right off the bat. So we did not go to video hearings. We went all telephonic. We only are doing the virtual kind of as needed when you need to see a witness, or, that's the request of the parties. But the majority were hybrid, and I think that's going to be continued for the future, because we do recognize not everybody has internet access. And I don't know if Nathan can speak to it, but part of the public defense services, at least on the dependency side, their attorneys were being told the office would give cell phones to help with the clients to maybe do that Zoom or Teams meeting or hearing using a smartphone. So we definitely, that was one of our conversations early on, is recognizing not only the public, but even when we sent some of our staff home to telecommute, that internet connections might not be the best or at all for even our staff. So that's something, it's always being looked at.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very similar in Superior Court. Not all the judges actually have Zoom and Teams, but all of them have telephonic capabilities. So we have basically a list of judges and what capabilities they have. And so if my client, for example, doesn't have internet access because the library is closed and that's where they would go, they can still call in to court, or sometimes the judges will call them. And so kind of my role is to make sure I know exactly that my client is prepared, however way that they can do it, if they have access. Often if it's non-substantive, what I will offer to do for the client is appear on their behalf. I will assert to the judge that I've had contact with them and really not make them be there for a hearing that is going to be a continuance or is going to be something more technical. So there's a lot of flexible options.
And I believe Nora is also writing an answer to that question. So thank you, Nora. Another question we have is from Joanne Scott Woods, who is asking specifically about people who have been wrongly arrested, wrongly imprisoned, and were waiting in jail, waiting for a hearing during this time. And the question is about trauma-informed care for these individuals who are in the jails, who have been waiting for hearings, and whether there's any resources in the community or in general, if there's resources.
I mean, I would say, just from my experience dealing directly with clients in the jail, I think that's a piece of the puzzle that still hasn't been solved. I don't think we're doing an adequate job for those who are incarcerated. What I can say on the attorney side, we're not allowed to visit our clients face to face right now. So everything that we do is by video visits, and they're very hard to get. So we also, one of the challenges, and it's a technical challenge, is that we have less access to our clients because there's only so many video cameras at the jail, and we fight for those appointments. So that has been a big challenge because a lot of times we play the role of therapist, lawyer, because we're the constant. What I can tell you on the legal side for our incarcerated clients, particularly if there's an issue of whether the arrest was wrongful, I can tell you that we're digging into that. We're doing things like treatment letters, which are information to get to the grand jury before it's presented. Whatever we can do, but it is a challenge. A lot of it is the realities of a technical, world and the limitations. And hopefully that's something we can address in the long term.
And just to tap on just a little bit of, again, juvenile court perspective, we are a trauma responsive court. The court did an audit about 15 years ago, looking at all of our policies, procedures, the physical layout of the courthouse. So we are consistently looking at program services for our families and our youths that are coming into our entire juvenile court system, either on the delinquency side or on the dependency side. And so we have a continuum of programs and services which are trauma responsive, trauma informed. And we kind of keep that list active and open. And it's really looking at the providers in the community and what do they offer. But I just wanted to share all of that with everybody and that information I did post our website. So there's information about restorative justice for juveniles out on our website, as well as our trauma responsive information.
Hi, this is Caddy Gray. If I could just jump in a second. Nora, whatever you type to Michael, if you would just talk about that aloud, one. And two, the June event, is that a public event? Can journalists go to that? And lastly, you talked about these new processes opening up more transparency. Transparency for whom and how?
Okay. I think I got all those questions, but I'll start with what I just wrote in the Q&A box about how courts have been addressing any digital divide or technology access issues. We're seeing that happen in multiple ways. The first is lots of courts have, and I think this was described by Tina, they're either only phone or audio participation, or Zoom, which is probably the most utilized platform across the country for remote hearings, allows litigants to just phone in from a landline, a cell phone. Some courts have launched, technology assistance programs where they're getting iPads and broadband access to litigants, to potential jurors. New Jersey and Texas are two examples of states that have launched statewide programs. I know New Jersey even has IT staff available that have, I think, gone out to folks' homes to help set them up and then get them on Zoom. And also many courts have launched, I see them most referred to as like Zoom rooms, but in-person spaces either at the courthouse or at remote locations. Libraries are a good example where there's a room where litigants, and some people we've heard prefer doing that. They don't want to do it in their home. They want to go to like a neutral public place, but where they can go and participate in those remote hearings in those Zoom rooms. And then you had a question, I think, Katie, about transparency. I think I mentioned in my remarks some of the benefits that we're seeing from the remote proceedings are, I think I mentioned transparency. So to whom, what I was referring to is most jurisdictions are allowing, live streaming, whether they're using YouTube or a different platform. But Texas, for example, you can go to the Texas Administrative Office of the Court's website and see a listing of all live proceedings of all courts in the whole state. You can click on them and watch them live. So transparency, meaning that, the public can have a ringside seat anytime they want to proceedings. So opening those court hearings up to the public, not just for those individuals who could take the time out to drive down to the courthouse and sit in and observe in person, but that opening them up and becoming more transparent that way.
Thank you for bringing that up. I forgot to mention that our Superior Court civil and criminal cases, you can go online and listen live to the hearings. You find your hearing, click on it, and you get to do audio. And again, that offers that access to justice for people who can't get into the courthouse.
And Nora, is the June event a public event? The one you were talking about that's listed on your website? Sorry, Valena.
Let's see. Refresh my memory. What June event is that?
Oh, you just mentioned June. You didn't say the details, but are there better phrase question? Are there public events that journalists can attend? On the website?
Yes, I think I just gave an example of, in June. I think, starting very shortly, we'll have at least a monthly webinar with those implementation lab sites. We'll put out a schedule, hopefully at least a couple months out. They are absolutely free. They're open to the public. They're open to the journalists. They're very interactive. Usually we get, a few thousand people who've been tuning in for these webinars. So it's not like you can't ask a question live, but just like this platform, we've got a Q&A box where participants can post questions to the panelists. And we have a section on our website. I can send a link to you, but so you can see like what's on the horizon for those events and webinars and how to register.
Valena, could I jump in for just a moment? This is Laura Conover again.
Yes, please. And we have 5 more minutes.
I'll be very brief. I figured out how to post a photo there, going back to, the assembly line of moving paper out of the legal services building where the county attorney's office is. And I wanted to go back to what Nate Wade from the Public Defender's Office was talking about with those months of really sheer terror for people trapped in jail as COVID was raging here in our area. And I wanted to point out that not only do we learn about systems but we also learn about culture as well. And so one thing I want to point out in this picture right here is that, in fact, on the left, so on the right is the spouse of a prosecutor receiving the next day's files, and on the left there is Dan South. And when Nate describes the panic-stricken clients that were in the jail and how the system had ground to a halt because hearings weren't happening, the previous administration was doing the best they could in COVID, and the leadership was working remotely because they were in the high-risk categories. And Dan South, as the story was told dozens of times to me because I didn't know him from Adam, he single-handedly created a triage system where defense attorneys could bring plea agreements to him for processing, and he became a centralized receipt unit just all in himself to process people who were likely to get time served and just needed to be removed from the system and removed from the jail as quickly as possible. And what that meant about a culture shift was that then, as the new administration came in and was looking for senior leadership, it wasn't the fanciest closing argument that carried the day. It was the silent act of heroism over and over again and pushing the system to get people out of jail that then made Dan South the new criminal chief of the entire criminal unit for the Pima County Attorney's Office. So we've learned so much in the pandemic about how systems and paper and technology and Zooming work, but it also created big, important cultural shifts, at least in my office as well.
Thank you very much.
So we have another, I think we have one more question in the box. Maybe it's, it's a comment actually from Joanne Scott Woods. So.
Oh, and I believe that was answered, though there was one question that I don't know that was answered about whether there has been greater pressure in COVID for defendants to plead guilty, right, instead of waiting for a trial.
Actually, I think in my experience, it's been the opposite. I mean, what Pima County did really well, and I echo everything Laura said about Dan. He was a hero of that office, and you know, we significantly reduced the jail population of non-convicted persons. There was, and by doing that, and I mentioned we had more time to work on cases because things were being continued and non-substantive. You know, plea agreements need to be done in person. They need to be taken in person. Sentencings need to be done in person. So there were no plea agreements that were happening for a while unless they were absolutely necessary, like Laura said, for a time-served plea or something like that. What it really gave us more time to do was dig into the cases more, as I said earlier. It gave us a lot more time for negotiation and a lot more room to get creative. I mean, I wrote some of the most creative, off-the-wall, like previously would have been unheard of deviation requests, you know, on pleas based on the current situation, based on, you know, the case, you know, that kind of thing. So actually, I think at least in Pima, I felt a lot less pressure to resolve a case that wasn't ready to be resolved, or to have a client accept a plea that was maybe better than trial, but really not a great plea given the situation. I feel like it had afforded my practice and my clients more opportunities to get better resolution.
If I could maybe indulge the participants and the speakers for just another minute before we close. If I could ask each of the panelists maybe to give us maybe in 30-second sound bites about what are the key stories they think that journalists need to cover when we're talking about courts. And remember, our journalists are not just from Arizona, but they're around the region. So what would you think are the main elements of what needs to be covered and looked at by the media right now in terms of court changes and court procedures? 30 seconds each. Okay. Whoever wants to go first? Maybe Nora?
Maybe not, Nora. Give me one turn to get my thoughts together.
All right, how about starting at the bottom? How about Laura with a 30 seconds?
Well, access to justice.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Access to justice, right? Due process, liberty. It's sort of unfair for me because I was running and I come out of the academia, kind of nationwide, a little bit of the new reform DA movement, and so for me it was all of a sudden everyone started asking, well, why is Arizona such a large incarcerator? Why do we have mass incarceration? And for me, I said, yes, we should ask that question every day. And some of us have been for 20 years. And so let's not return to normal. Let's make sure we don't just go back to incarcerating people who should not be incarcerated.
Thank you, Laura. Tina?
I'd like to go for the feel-good stories again, but that's the culture we have here at Juvenile Court is we're all about the youth and families and finding ways to do best by them. And I think just recognizing the collaborative nature of our stakeholders and our groups and how we were able to work together to get through this pandemic together.
Thank you. Nate?
I'm sure. I think for me, as far as, just human interest in the humanity of what we do, I just go back and point to, I think it's just fascinating how much I learned about my clients during this. And I think that is really, for me, very interesting. And it's something that I will take with me. I'm not going to stop giving my clients more options to have access to me. So as far as humans and shared humanity, we're realizing that whether you're homeless, whether you're a professional, that kind of thing, there are still ways to make connections, and we need to not assume that people aren't trying because they come from or they have different challenges. And I think too, as far as court, I feel like we've learned that we waste a lot of time in court. Particularly like morning court on, things that like continuances and things like that. I think there's a story in how to build a better, more efficient process for taking cases through. Do we really need to show up every 2 weeks and ask for a continuance and drag our clients in, drag ourselves in? So I think maybe how to build a better court procedure.
And Nora, the last word, over to you.
Yeah, really basically echoing what a lot of the panelists have already said. I mean, I would focus on the better, stronger judiciary that is coming out the backside of this global pandemic. I mean, it's been fascinating to watch courts pivot and really become user focused and really take some critical examination of the process, like Nate said, really focusing on, what does the community, what do litigants, what do parties need from the courts? I think there's a lot of good examples right now of courts really, holding focus groups and interviews and really reaching out and asking those who utilize the courts, how is this working? What do they need? What services aren't being offered that maybe could be? Really focusing on the user perspective. I mean, there are things that, for example, online dispute resolution programs that, courts have been kind of talking about kind of in theoretical terms for a while, but really are starting to launch because it's what the public wants and demands.
Thank you, Nora. So I want to thank you all, especially for indulging us with the extra 15 minutes beyond schedule, and a special thank you to Professor Beety for shepherding a wonderful panel. I think we all got a lot out of this, and even with the occasional blip in typical Zoom communications, I think we all learned a lot. So this is the end of our first webinar in this series. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we are beginning anew next Thursday with another round of subjects. So please watch the conference page. You've all got the link now for word of what the agenda and the speakers will be. And if any of you have questions, of course, more comments, please let me know. We are, as I think I said earlier in my messages to everyone, we are recording these sessions. The videos will probably not be available immediately because they have to be formatted. If we can get the videos of today's sessions up before next week's panel, we certainly will. But we'll certainly try to get them up as soon as we can. And Kathy, did you have anything more that you wanted to say as a farewell? Okay, once again, thank you. It's 5 o'clock here for us in the East Coast. For you guys, it's just really the beginning of your day. So have a great rest of the day and a great weekend, and we will see you next week. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.